If you are in the morning, in the afternoon, I'm sending my sincere greetings to all of you. And I want to pay special attention to the following dignitaries who are within this platform and to serve it. The Honorable Minister for Trade, Industry, Regional Integration and Employment. I want to also send a sincere greetings to the Under Secretary General, UNDSA, His Excellency Mr. Louis Zemin and his team. I also want to send my sincere greetings to the UNDP resident rep in the Gambia, Ms. Aissata Day. I also want to send my sincere greetings to the Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Trade, Industry, Regional Integration and Employment. I also want to send my sincere greetings to the Statistician General, Gambia Bureau of Statistics, who is represented by Mr. Aliu Saho. I also want to recognize the presence of Amsin Sibanda, who just came in. And I also want to recognize each and every individual on this platform, in your name, in your capacity, in the institution that you represent. I want to make this that we are providing this opportunity to all the stakeholders, both internally and outside the Gambia, to look at a document that has been prepared by the GBOS team with consultant, international consultant, and the local consultant to review and assess in a bid to find ways and means how we could look at the COVID in terms of its impact on MSMEs. We all know that the MSME landscape in the Gambia is not that much sophisticated, both in terms of finance and technology. The impact of the COVID has hit hard on this sector, and this is the sector that forms the grassroots of basic economic processes. And it is very much important today we are giving the attention as a government to look at issues affecting the MSMEs as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. So I guess we'll be able to have a deliberation both as speakers and also as participants to see how we can unite our measures that we thought could change the game for the MSMEs. I know there are limitations in terms of the scope, but I guess that will be representative and reflective for other parts of the country and other sectors of the MSMEs that we could not reflect in this assessment. But nonetheless, I want us to look at it in detail so that at least anything coming out as an output to this forum would be very much meaningful to the MSME sector. In this regard, we have speakers. I would not want to preempt what they will discuss with us. They will also have their good time to give us in detail, even though some of the documents were shared with us, but at least we will have an opportunity here by their presentation to give us the details so that at least we can react to those details. I want to share the agenda for this meeting, and you can see on your screen so that we look at them. I know it's also been shared with us so that at least we can validate or we see if there are issues that we can bring in to make it as rich as possible. Then the floor will be open for all participants to ensure that we make it an agenda that is representative. So that will come after when the speakers or those who are supposed to do the remark take the floor, and then eventually we can also look at the agenda to get us into the presentations. So on this note, I want to give the floor to Mr. Amasin Sibanda, the Chief National Strategies and Capacity Building Branch, Division for Sustainable Development Goal, UNDESA, to take the floor and make a quick remark. Thank you.
Thank you, Faba Jammeh, for the warm remark. Honorable Minister of Trade, Industry, Regional Integration and Employment, Mr. Sidi Keita, Government of the Republic of the Gambia, Permanent Secretary, Mr. Hassan M. Jallo, Mr. Faba Jammeh, Director of Industry, Mr. Aliou Saho, Deputy Statistician General, ladies and gentlemen. Let me start by thanking the government of the Republic of the Gambia and all those involved in organizing this capacity building event on the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises in the Gambia. We are pleased to jointly organize this event with the Ministry of Trade, Industry, Regional Integration and Employment. Honorable Minister, your presence demonstrates the high level of commitment of the government to the partnership with the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs Division for Sustainable Development Goals to promote the formalization and growth of micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises in the Gambia. We are meeting today after the 2020 Africa Industrialization Week celebrations were held last week under the theme Inclusive and Sustainable Industrialization in the African Continental Free Trade Area and COVID-19 era. Across Africa, there is growing recognition that MSMEs matter for a sustainable post-pandemic recovery. Small business enterprises are also critical to the structural transformation of Africa and the achievement of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the AU Agenda 2063. Africa's industrialization prospects are anchored on unleashing the growth of micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises guided by the African Union SME strategy. Therefore, it is quite reassuring and encouraging to see the commitment of the government of the Gambia to create enabling conditions that promote the formalization and growth of MSMEs, contributing to the continent's industrialization efforts. Across the continent, MSMEs have been disproportionately affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. According to a recent report by the International Trade Center, 1 in 3 small firms in Africa have been strongly affected by COVID-19, mostly involving reduced sales and/or difficulty accessing inputs. The report also notes that $2.4 billion worth of export is expected to be lost. In the specific case of the Gambia, the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic are quite visible, from the empty beaches and hotels to shuttered businesses and local markets. The travel and tourism sector, that accounts for more than 20% of GDP, has taken a massive hit following global travel bans, flight suspensions, lockdowns, and social distancing measures. While these tough measures have helped prevent the further spread of the pandemic, they have also taken a heavy toll on MSMEs, undermining the livelihoods of the poor and people in vulnerable situations, including women, children and youth, older persons, persons with disabilities, migrants, and refugees. Even during normal time, MSMEs, especially those in the informal sector, operate with tight profit margins and have limited cash reserves to weather economic shocks. Hence, the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic threatens to overwhelm MSMEs' scoping capacity through interrupted supply chains, reduced demand, delayed repayment, and fast accumulating cash flow pressures. Compared to the large and formalized enterprises, MSMEs are less able to tap into emergency credits and economic stimulus programs, although they are arguably the ones that need such support the most. Informal and unregistered MSMEs, particularly those operated by women and young people, are left with even fewer avenues to access such support. Despite these challenges, it needs to be recognized that the pandemic has also prompted MSMEs to adapt, innovate, and explore new market opportunities, including e-commerce. It is against this backdrop that this event is taking place. The presentations on the rapid assessment of the COVID-19 impact on MSMEs in the Gambia and on improving MSME resilience to the external risks in the post-COVID-19 economic resurgence should provide valuable information on how the pandemic has affected MSMEs in the Gambia, especially in the informal sector. I believe our discussions today will be helpful to not only understand more the impact of the pandemic on MSMEs, but also identify its ripple effects on households whose livelihoods are dependent on the survival and continuity of MSMEs. Our discussions will also help us understand the needs, gaps, and challenges that MSMEs are facing if we are to build back better. Going forward, it will be critical to ensure that sustained policy support is tailor-made and targets the specific needs of MSMEs if we are to strengthen MSMEs as the first responders to the pandemic in terms of protecting jobs and sustaining the livelihoods of people in vulnerable situations. Moreover, international cooperation and partnerships remain the key for building an enabling policy environment for MSME growth through knowledge exchange and experience sharing. We look forward to continuing our cooperation and partnership with the Ministry of Trade, Industry, Regional Integration and Employment, and the UN country team in the Gambia, the success of which has been exhibited through the capacity building event today. I'm glad to see UN country team colleagues have joined us today. It is imperative that we fully leverage the power of MSMEs to build that better in this decade of action to deliver the global goals. I thank you for your attention, and I would like to wish the event a smooth success. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for the statement, which is quite insightful. And then just to make a few points regarding your statement, you've mentioned the fact that the presence of the Honorable Minister have given you greater assurance in the fight against COVID, and in which the government of the Gambia have paid attention and is prepared to work with partners to ensure that together we will be able to provide what it takes to put the MSMEs on a productive base. You mentioned the fact that we're just coming out of the Africa Industrialization Day, which has a greater link to this discussion, and particularly the MSMEs. And then the commitment of government to formalize the MSME sector, which was something that you also alluded to, and then you supported. You mentioned that, yes, the COVID has come and really it has hit the vulnerable section of society, particularly the household and the MSMEs. And the loss that has been reported, which is like $2.4 billion globally in this period of the COVID-19 pandemic. You mentioned the fact that the Gambia has been hit hard by the measures that we have put in place to ensure that people abide by them to mitigate the COVID, but these measures have impacted on the daily activities of MSMEs. So in fact, the cross-section of society, particularly the household, their income has been reduced, their opportunities have been reduced, given the measures that have been put in place. So all we need now is to provide a coping mechanism for the MSMEs to ensure that they'll be able to regain their sustainable path that they used to maintain. You said this discussion should be able to be helpful, especially to look at the household and the MSMEs and to look at the vulnerability. And then you also mentioned the issues about policy environment, which in fact is going to be part of this presentation, so that recommendations coming out of this forum could serve as this policy environment that the MSMEs will need. And finally, you have registered your willingness to forge ahead with the Gambia government, with your the UN system in the Gambia here, to ensure that together we put our resources together to ensure that we provide that environment that is conducive enough for MSME operation. So really, I want to thank you for this very good speech that you provided, and then assure that, yes, we'll note every aspect of the speech to ensure that we can move together in this fight against COVID pandemic. So I thank you for the speech, and I thank you for the regard that you have shown, both for the Minister and the government of the Gambia. So on this note, I would want to introduce and then open the floor for the Honorable Minister, Mr. Sidi Keita, to also give a quick statement and forum. Thank you very much, and welcome to you, Mr. Keita.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much, Abba, for the introduction. And I welcome you all to this webinar on the outcome of the UNDSA and the Ministry of Trade, Regional Integration, Industry and Employment on the impact assessment, rapid impact assessment of COVID-19 on the Gambian MSME sector. On the Secretary General UNDSA, His Excellency Leon Zinmin and his team, UND Resident Rep in the Gambia, SA2D, Permanent Secretary, Minister of Trade, Industry, Regional Integration and Employment, the Statistician General of the Gambian Statistics Bureau, international participants, ladies and gentlemen. It is with great delight that I welcome you all to this seminar, online webinar, and particularly our partners at the various UN agencies, international and local participants joining us today for this deliberation. I take this opportunity to thank the team at the UNDSA, my ministry, GBOS, international consultant, local consultant, for making this event a possibility. Mr. Chair, the current situation ushered globally by the COVID-19, particularly for the developing countries like Gambia, is very well observed. And as has been mentioned earlier, it has had adverse impact on our economy as a country. And as we know, at the beginning of the COVID, we deemed this to be a health crisis. But as the crisis is unfolding, we have now observed the adverse economic activities, the adverse impact on the economic activities this pandemic has ushered on our country and the overall global landscape, translating into a financial crisis never seen before. As a small and open economy, the country of Gambia thrives on the medium and small and medium-sized enterprises, which form the bedrock of the economy. And this was the most vulnerable sector the pandemic has hit hardest. Households have lost key sources of revenue in reaction to the measures taken to contain the spread of the virus, and the assessment has focused on 4 key areas of the medium and small and medium-sized enterprise system, namely horticulture, poultry, fisheries, and the distributive trade, particularly for the second-hand clothing. These areas were, as has been noted, mainly informal, and the study has indicated that the adverse impact resulted in the reduction of earnings to the magnitude of 91% for some sectors, and the highest sector that was adversely affected was that of second-hand clothing, which lost 95% of their earnings, followed by the fish sellers. Mr. Chair, the current state of affairs needs a more coordinated action in mitigating the negative effects of the COVID-19 on the Gambia, and we're grateful that through the UNDSA support for this study of enhancing national capacity for unleashing the full potential of MSMEs in achieving the SDGs in developing countries. My ministry has worked closely with GBOS, the local consultants, to do a rapid assessment on the impact of COVID-19 on the informal sector. We therefore welcome the efforts of the agency and all other UN agencies as well, particularly the UNDP, in providing the immediate to medium and long-term assistance in tackling the socio-economic impact of the COVID-19. By funding these studies, this will inform policy options for the country, and my ministry will closely look at the outcome of this study, as we expect to embrace it in our policy intervention shortly. These policy actions will guide the ministry to ensure that the response that we will do for the effects of the COVID-19 is well informed and the study is very timely. Without much ado, I will conclude my intervention at this stage and thank all the stakeholders in this enterprise for making this study available to the ministry, and we will take the output thereof, as has been mentioned, and it will form a very useful input in our intervention going forward. And I thank you all for your participation, particularly the allied agencies of the United Nations and UNDSA in particular. With that, I thank you all and look forward to your fruitful deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you, my Honorable Minister, Mr. Keita, for this remark from the Ministry of Trade, Industry, Regional Integration and Employment. There are key issues that I just want to share with the rest. I know we have all heard what he said, but just to buttress, he mentioned the issue of the Gambia as a least developed country and being so volatile in this pandemic moment. He mentioned the fact that initially when COVID came, it was thought to be an health issue, but this was not the case as we move on into the pandemic. Then the Gambia, he said the Gambia is an open economy which thrives on the resilience of MSMEs. Like I've mentioned earlier on, MSMEs are the grassroots in all economies, and therefore they provide employment, they provide they provide employment, and also they provide jobs, and then they serve as poverty alleviation in the economy. He said the Gambia MSME ecosystem, the study looks at 3 or 4 areas, which are the horticulture, the poultry, the fisheries, and the redistributive trade, which is the second-hand clothing. Then he mentioned the losses that have been reported as a result of the pandemic. And in each of the sector, we have 98% reduction in the earnings by 90.8% rather, which is almost like 91%. You also have 94%. You have 91% as losses in the various identified sectors in the MSMEs. He stated that the state of affairs certainly needs a more coordinated action, and this is why, in fact, we are in this forum today to at least create that coordination and then see if we can have a pool basket to support the MSMEs in their venture in the economy. He mentioned the fact that efforts by UNDESA and UN agency were very much welcome by the ministry, particularly at this relevant time of the pandemic. And then he finally mentioned the issue of policy options that will be able to alleviate and minimize the impact of the COVID as things are right now. So it was few of the things that I just noted, just so that at least we can reflect on it and then serve as the basis or the bedrock for this forum. So at least the 2 statements that have been given will provide the direction, and then I hope the presentations that are also going to ensue will also create an in-depth analysis for the assessment. So I thank you, Honorable Minister, for taking your time and then providing this statement right now. Thank you very much for that. And then the next on the agenda is to look at the agenda item, if you can share it on the screen, Mr. Clark, so that at least we can validate and then move on. Mr. Clark.
Yes, we'll share the agenda.
So I want to open the floor to the participants to look at the agenda items before we go into the session in it proper. So if you have any issue relating to the agenda, let's confirm and then see how we can validate, and then we move on. The floor is open. If no hand is up, I will assume it's okay to go. Now, I want to take this opportunity to invite the senior representative of MOTI, a presentation by Gibos rather, to look at the background on undertaking of rapid assessment, overview of rapid assessment, that is the scope of the study, selected subsectors and findings. And I guess Mr. Sao will do this presentation. The floor is open to you, Mr. Sao. Thank you.
Okay, good afternoon to you all. I'm representing the Study Student General of Gambia Statistics. The presentation will be done by my colleague, Mr. Ibrahim, who was part of the assessment from the design to the production of the end product. GIBOS, since COVID has started, have been embarking on a series of assessments. The first one was funded by UNDP. That was the impact of COVID on the tourism industry and retail sectors, which led to allocation of $50 for 650 employees in the sector. The second assessment was the LUMO assessment, which has led to the opening of the LUMOs. And the third one was the industry assessment, which will be presented today for the findings. So I think all what is to be discussed have already been discussed earlier. So not to waste much time, I will just give the floor to my colleague, Mr. Ibrahim Suso, who will take the lead in the presentation, and we are doing it together. So thank you very much. So Mr. Suso, my colleague, will do the presentation on behalf of GIBOS for the findings of the assessment.
Thank you so much, Mr. Saho. I'm not sure I know how to share my screen from this. I don't know whether I can get help from those that organize the meeting. Mr. Clark?
Yes. Yes. We are here to help. When you finish the presentation of one slide, you can indicate us to flip to the next page. Then my colleague Annie and myself will be here to help flip the page of your presentation.
Oh, okay. So you have the presentation. Okay, that's fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so we'll start from the cover page. So on the cover page is indicated that this is an assessment of the impact of COVID-19 on the livelihoods of MSMEs engaged in poultry farming, second-hand clothes selling, fish sellers, horticulture farmers in the Banjul, Brikama, and Kanifing LGAs. Please note that these are only 3 LGAs out of 8 that we have in the Gambia. So the assessment only focused on these 3 LGAs, that is Banjul, Kanifing, and Brikama. And it was conducted by the Gambia Bureau of Statistics. So you can flip to the next slide, please. The outline. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Can I proceed? Okay. Okay, so on the outline, we have the introduction. And after the introduction, then we would have given you a background, the activity and how we went about the activity. Then we'll present the key findings, which will be broken down into 3 subcategories. That is the socio-demographic characteristics, the economic, and the third one would be impact mitigation and support. So go to the third slide, please. So on the introduction, we give you a brief background of the purpose of this assessment. This assessment was meant to assess the impact of the pandemic on the livelihoods of 4 MSMEs, as was indicated earlier. That is the second-hand clothing dealers, poultry farmers, fish sellers, and horticulture farmers. So this assessment will actually help to design interventions aimed at reducing the vulnerability of traders and to enhance their ability to cope with the negative consequences of the pandemic. So during the sampling, given the limitation in terms of the budget, we had to do a purposive sampling in terms of the horticulture gardens, because we have a lot of them across the greater Banjul areas, that is the Banjul, Kanifing, and Brikama LGAs. But we had to do a purposive sampling from those gardens that we have a list that was provided earlier before the activity started. So we did a purposive sampling, and we ended up selecting 132, which was distributed proportionally to the number of male and female gardeners in each garden. So we did a proportional sampling of proportional to size, which we did and distributed across male and female gardeners, even though we had some limitations because we don't have a lot of males engaged in horticulture gardens. So in such instances, we supplemented the list with, we replaced them with female horticulture gardeners, because we couldn't get the exact number that we sampled when we got to the field. So in terms of the second-hand clothing dealers, we had to visit markets that are around the Banjul, Kanifing, and Brikama areas, where most of these second-hand clothing dealers would be stationed in their cares. So of those, we selected 136 second-hand clothing dealers across the Banjul, Kanifing, and Brikama areas. So in terms of fish sellers, we had a list of fish sellers that we headed on, a list of poultry farmers, specifically in the Banjul fish landing site we visited, the Bakau fish landing site was also visited. So from those, we interviewed 106 fish sellers, and 64 poultry farmers were also interviewed. But we had to interview the poultry farmers on phone because we have the poultry farmers located at different locations. It was going to be difficult in terms of logistics. But because we already had their contact details prior, it made life easy. We stationed one of the enumerators in the office who was calling them and filling out the questionnaires from the office level, because it was going to be difficult for him to visit all the 64 poultry farms that are located across the Banjul, Kanifing, and Brikama LGAs. So we ended up having a total of 500 traders. So we actually sampled 500 traders and we interviewed all of them. In terms of the training was scheduled for 2 days, and the first day was conducted in English because we had to go through the questionnaire in English to ensure that they understand the questionnaire first. And then later we did a translation of the questionnaire in the local languages, in terminologies understood by all the interviewers. We wanted to make sure that they all understand it in the same way. And the second day, we had to train them on use of the CAPI, that is the computer-assisted personal interview, because we were using handheld devices to collect the data, so as to reduce the amount of errors that are going to be produced during data collection. Fourth slide, please. So during the training, we covered the following topics. As the overview of the exercise, we also went through the concepts and definitions of terminology so that they understand what they're dealing with, because there are terminologies in the questionnaire that have to be explained to the interviewer. When they're posing the questions, they have a clear picture of what these terminologies are in their minds, including the local equivalents. We also explained to them what the roles of the supervisors would be, what the roles of the enumerators would be, and some interviewing techniques to ensure that the interviews were done the right way. And also we explained to them clearly what our target population is, so that they do not include anybody who was not supposed to be part of the assessment. On the first day of the training, we actually conducted in English, and on the second day when we were doing the CAPI, we did some mock interviews, just so that they would have a hands-on with the tablets. So 12 people were trained, 2 of whom were supervisors and 10 were interviewers. Fifth slide. So during the data collection, two teams were constituted for data collection exercise. It involved a mixed mode, that is face-to-face interviews and telephone interviews. Some were visited, and mostly for the poultry farmers, we had to call them. As I mentioned earlier, they are dispersely located within the Banjul, Kama, and Tanti LCS. So the fieldwork itself took 6 days, and we were using CS Pro as a data capture application. But during data analysis, we had to export the data to data which is much friendlier in terms of doing data cleaning and running the tables. Slide 6, the findings. The findings of the assessment shows that a total of 500 traders were interviewed, translating to a response rate of 100%, as I mentioned earlier. We interviewed all 500 traders. So given the small size of the sample that was selected, we couldn't afford to miss any of the traders. So we tried as much as possible to include all of them in the assessment. But when we did the assessment, during the analysis, we realized that we have slightly more males than females, which translates to 51% and 49% respectively. It means 51% of those that were interviewed were male and 49 were females. And majority of the respondents are within the ages 36 to 64 and 25 to 35 years, with 57 of those that were interviewed were within the ages of 36 to 64, and 30.6% of those that were interviewed are within the ages of 25 to 35. And most of the traders were Gambians, which translates to 83%. So by their level of educational attainment, most of the traders reported to have never been to school. That is a little above half of those that were interviewed. That is 52%. Regarding marital status, most of them were married, with 78.6%. And the majority, that is 86.8%, reported to have at least one child. Most of the traders were in business for more than 10 years. That is 61.6% of the traders reported to have been in business for more than 10 years. Slide 7. As seen in the graph below, almost equal numbers of males and females were interviewed. We mentioned that earlier, that is 51 against 49%. But there are variations by sex and type of business as shown in the chart below. The graph would also show you that traders in second-hand clothing farming are dominated by males, whereas the horticulture and fish sellers were dominated by females, considered from the graph below. So from the graph below, it shows that in terms of second-hand clothing sellers, we have more of males in that sector than females, because you have 39.7% of those that were interviewed being male and 10.3% female. Whereas it's almost the opposite in the horticulture sector. You have more females engaged in the horticulture sector than more females than male. And in the poultry as well, you have more males than females. That is 84.4% against 15.6%. Whereas for fish sellers, you have as well more females than males. So we move to the next slide, slide 8. The economic characteristics. We try to look at the type of business by average number of paid and unpaid employees by sex. We asked a series of questions, 4 questions. One which was asking how many male paid employees they have, and 2 being how many female paid employees they have, and 3 how many unpaid male employees, and 4 how many unpaid female employees they have. So during the analysis, it shows that 79.4% of the traders reported not having any paid male employee, while 91% of those traders reported not having any female paid employees. But looking at those that have unpaid employees, most of them, 37.2%, reported not having any unpaid employees. These are employees that would come and help them in their work or their trade and not being paid, mostly family members and friends. And 94% of the traders also reported not having any unpaid female employees. So in terms of the poultry farmers, they accounted for the highest proportion of traders who reported to have paid male and female employees, given the fact that the amount of work that is required to maintain a poultry farm, they would in most cases be forced to hire people to work with them or work for them in their poultry farms. Slide 9. So still on the economic characteristics, the chart below will show you that 61.6% of the traders that were interviewed have been in operation for more than 10 years, and 15.4% have been in the business from between 7 to 10 years, and 12.2% have been in business from 4 to 6 years, and 8.2% have been in business from 1 to 3 years. So you have a little less than 3% who have been in business for less than a year. So still on economic characteristics, on slide 10, you have the distribution of the average weekly revenue pre-COVID, that is before the COVID, the outbreak of the COVID. Specifically for the Gambia, that would be before March this year, by type of business. So the highest average weekly income was reported among poultry farmers, that is 80,900. So because of the small size of the sample, we had to take the median instead of the mean, because you often have in such cases outliers on the lower bound and on the upper bound. So it's much more advisable to take the median than to take the mean. So when we took the median, and we have 18,900 for poultry farmers, which was the highest amongst all these other sectors. So whereas for second-hand clothing, they have a median average weekly income of 3,500. And for the horticulture farmers, they have 2,000. And for fish sellers, it's 3,500. So the lowest per week was for those working in the horticulture farms. Let's proceed to slide 11. So the distribution of MSMEs level of business since the onset of the pandemic, that is from March, by type of business. The pandemic had different impacts on life. So when they were asked, most of the traders reported that the pandemic has led to reduction in their earnings, that is, which accounts to up to 90.8%. The proportion was highest for second-hand clothing sellers, who reported that up to 94.9% of the second-hand clothing sellers reported that they suffered a reduction in their earnings, followed by fish sellers with 91.7%. So in terms of interpretation, it will show you that for second-hand clothing sellers that were interviewed, 94.9% of those that were interviewed reported that their earnings were reduced since the onset of coronavirus. And if you're going to analyze for the fish sellers, it will show you that 91.7% of those that are in the fish selling industry, 91.7% of those suffered a reduction in earnings. For some of the poultry farmers, that is up to 1.6%, reported that the pandemic has led an increase in the level of their business, followed by horticulture farmers. Given that whatever the case may be, for some of these sectors, people would still have to survive. And, so for that reason, some of them reported, but it's very minute, because all of them are up to like less than 2%. For poultry farmers, 1.6% of those that were interviewed reported that they had an increase in the level of their business, whereas 1.4% reported that they had an increase in their business amongst the horticulture farmers. So for horticulture farmers, they reported the highest proportion, 8.3% of those who reported that their level of business remained the same, that is, it hasn't changed since the onset of the pandemic, whereas 6.3% of the poultry farmers reported that there has been a stagnation in terms of their earnings, that is, their business remained the same. So after we asked them about the impact of, after we asked them about the economic status, we also asked about the impact of the COVID on them, on their businesses and what mitigating factors have they resorted to and what sort of support have they received, especially from government. So that should be on slide 12. So on slide 12, most of the traders reported that the virus or the pandemic has led to a reduction in their earnings. That is, of all the traders that were interviewed, 62% reported that pandemic actually led to a reduction in their earnings. And this proportion was highest among horticulture farmers, which accounted to up to 67.9%, followed by fish sellers, which accounted for 60.7%. So poultry farmers actually reported the highest proportion among the traders, 21.3%, who reported that the pandemic has led to a total loss of their earnings. It means they lost everything that they had. So for horticulture farmers, 7.6% and the fish sellers, 7.0%, have the highest proportions among the traders who reported the pandemic has led to a loss of jobs. Whereas the findings of the assessment has also shown that the pandemic has led to high indebtedness, as reported by 11.6% of the respondents. The proportion in terms of the different types of businesses was highest among fish sellers and second-hand clothing traders, which translates to 16.6% and 15.2% respectively. On slide 13, most of the traders reported to be doing other business, which accounted to up to 21%. The proportion was highest for poultry farmers at 7.7%. So up to 37.7% of poultry farmers reported doing other business, apart from just the poultry farm. This is followed by relying on support from family or friends, which accounted for 23.8%. And the proportion was highest among fish sellers with 29.0%, and those among poultry farmers with 3.9%, which shows that poultry farmers reported the lowest proportion of having relied on support from their family members. The proportion was also highest among sellers and second-hand clothing sellers, 16.5%, 16.4%. Other measures adopted by the traders are they get paid employment elsewhere and handouts, and there were variations by type of business. So among those that were interviewed, all the non-horticulture farmers and poultry farmers reported, none of the horticulture farmers and poultry farmers reported seeking paid employment as a mitigating factor. So it means that the horticulture farmers and poultry farmers did not have paid employment as a mitigating factor. Slide 14. The findings of the assessment show cash donations, which accounted for up to 51.2%, and food items feed family up to 23.9%, as the most important needed support requested by the traders. But they were asked if they were to be given support, what type of support would they need. So up to 51.2% reported that they would prefer to be given cash donations, and 23.9% reported that they would need food items to feed their families. Amongst those sectors, second-hand clothing dealers have the highest proportion among traders who reported cash donation, as their support needs with 60%, followed by the poultry farmers and fish sellers with 52.6% and 52.7% respectively. Food items as a support was reported by all types of traders except poultry farmers, which means that poultry farmers did not report, none of the poultry farmers that were interviewed out of the 64 did not report that they would need food items as a support, as a mitigating factor. So getting paid employment, access to finance, or what we call it bank loans, and other support needs were also reported as needed support by the traders. Among the three measures, that is access to finance, accounted for the highest proportion, 4.7%. It was requested more by second-hand clothing sellers, which accounted to up to 7%, followed by fish sellers, which accounted to almost 7%, 6.9%. So still on impact mitigation support, the traders were asked whether what sort of benefit, whether they've benefited from the recently exposed government support. So recently, government has embarked on some disbursement of support. One which was done countrywide was the rice and the sugar distribution that was done for all households in the Gambia. And another, up to 84% of the households in the Gambia. And there was also a gas distribution that was done in most parts of the country, except and I think parts of the North. So amongst all the traders, less than a quarter of the traders, that is 23.0%, they have benefited from recently disbursed government support. The proportion of those who reported that they received the support was highest among horticulture farmers with 36%, followed by fish sellers and second-hand clothing sellers, 21.8% and 20.6% respectively. All those that were interviewed in the poultry sector indicated not benefiting from the recent disbursed government support, which means that all 64 poultry farmers that were interviewed reported that they did not benefit from the recently disbursed government support. So on the next slide, the 16th slide, they were also asked about the persistence of whether government support was, that is, those that reported that they have benefited from the recently disbursed government support. So about 97% of those who reported to have benefited from the support reported that it was useful, with all the fish sellers reported to have support, indicated that it was helpful. All those who are amongst the fish sellers that reported to have benefited from this reported that it was helpful. Whereas for horticulture farmers, 96.2% reported it was helpful. Second-hand clothing dealers, 92.7% reported that the government support they received was helpful. Slide 17. So in terms of the distribution of traders' access to financial services, because they were asked if they have access to a bank account, be it a current or a savings account. About 45.0% of traders reported to have a bank account. Poultry farmers have the highest proportion of those who report to have a bank account, followed by second-hand clothing sellers with 96.9% and 58.8% respectively, which shows that almost all the poultry farmers reported to have a bank account, except for a few. It's almost about 3.1% of those that are in the poultry farms poultry farm business don't have an account. So among the traders who reported not having access to financial services, fish sellers and horticulture farmers have the highest proportion without a bank account, 79.5% and 65.3% respectively. So you see from the graph that poultry farmers, most of them reporting to have a bank account. Whereas the difference was also high for sellers. You have 79.5% of those that are doing fish selling reporting to have a bank account, that is 79.5% of the graph below. So moving to about 92% of the traders reported not having any outstanding loans at the bank. The reason why it was not asked is bank account without having an account in the bank. So the proportion of traders without outstanding loans at the bank was highest for poultry farmers with 95.2%, followed by second-hand clothing sellers and fish sellers with 91.3% and 90.6% respectively. While the proportion of traders who have outstanding loans at the bank was highest for horticulture farmers with 12.0%, followed by fish sellers and second-hand clothing dealers. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Suso. You've done a great job and you've taken a great time. I want to thank you and the GBOS team for doing this wonderful job, presenting on the 4 sectors that you have identified. Now, I think what we will do will allow participants to ask questions. I'll give probably 15 to 20 minutes for the questions, and then we can move to the next presentation. So the floor is open if you have any questions to ask regarding the presentation. Thank you. Yes, hello.
Yes, this is Nafi Bari here.
Come again? Oh, okay, yes.
Yes. Yes, can I have the floor? Can I have the floor?
I've seen some hands raised up, but you can take the floor. Can you hear me? Hello, PS Barry?
Yes, can you hear me?
I can hear you. I said you take the floor, but there are hands that are also raised up. But you can take the floor for now.
All right. Thank you very much. I join you in congratulating the team from GBOS for this presentation. But I just wanted to ask that whether this data was disaggregated by gender, because I am speaking as president of the Gambia Women's Chamber, and we would have been very interested to know what percentage or what the effects are on women traders. I have seen, yes, it's globally on SMEs, but we would have loved to have something on the gender disaggregated data so that we would know the impact COVID had on women traders for that matter. Thank you.
Thank you very much,
Mr. Suso?
Yes, we're getting.
I want you to take note.
Okay, we'll take
I want you to take note. I will take 2 additional questions. Yeah. Anna?
Thank you, Father. My question is regarding the slide that talked about the impact of COVID on their earnings. And then it said that there was a reduction in earnings. But then the presentation just said that about, I think, 60-something% of the participants, of those questions, said that they had a reduction in their earnings. But then in the previous slide, it was clear that they were making a certain number of earnings before COVID-19. So was there any question, or in their findings, is there a specific, instead of the traders, instead of saying, let's say, about 60-something% of the traders said that there was a reduction in earnings, was there any specific number as to, like, let's say the previous slide, saying that, okay, it was this percentage reduction, this percentage that was reduced in their earnings? I don't know if my question makes sense. But my question is that basically, what is the actual reduction in their earnings according to the questions that they asked the traders?
Mr. Suso, do you follow?
Yes.
Mr. Suso, do you follow the question?
We're waiting for the third.
Okay, we're taking the third. Yeah, we're taking the third one, and then you can intervene.
Okay.
Olimatu?
Good afternoon. Yeah, good afternoon, Baba and team. How are you? Yeah, I would just like to seek some clarification. Probably it was mentioned at the beginning, but maybe I must have missed it. I would just want to know how did the selection of those 4 sectors came about? What were the criteria resulting to the selection of those 4 sectors? That is especially with the second-hand clothing. So that's what I would just like to seek clarification for. Thank you.
Mr. Suso. Yeah, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you so much. So the first one, the disaggregation by sex. We collected information on the gender of the traders, but during the analysis, we only did a very broad disaggregation, that is looking at the sex of those that were interviewed. But in terms of the other variables, or in terms of the other questions, we have not gone further to do any further analysis in terms of sex. What we did was we disaggregated by sector. But if there is a need for us to do that, it's possible because we already collected data on gender. That can be done. But in the report, that has not reflected in the report but it is possible. So the second one would be okay, hello? Okay, so the second one would be where we asked about reduction in earnings. What we did in essence was that we asked them whether they actually had a reduction in earnings. So the proportions that are presented in these findings is the proportion of those who reported that they had a reduction in earnings. But we haven't gone further to ask them how much of their earnings have reduced. So that would be the clarification that I would just add to that question. So the other one being why we selected the 4. So I'll allow Mr. Saho, who was there from inception as well, to shed light on that.
I think before we are just provided information by the Ministry of Trade. I think then it was Anna and the consultant that they're targeting those 4 SMEs. That's how we come about it. Regarding the second-hand clothes dealers, we were provided a list of an MSME mapping which was done by University of the Gambia, I think, for Ministry of Trade in 2017. We go by that mapping exercise, but if you look at the mapping exercise, it was a bit outdated. Some of the numbers were no longer operational. So the strategy was, the sample size per size was 500 respondents. When we have the breakdown for the horticulture, for the poultry farmers, it was 64. It was a complete census. And fish landing size, those at the fish landing sites, we take a sample. And those at the horticulture garden, we take the sample. Then the rest, we make it up from the second-hand dealers. But based on the list that was provided, in the Greater Bank area, there were 136 in that list. But when we realize that some of the numbers are no longer operational to meet the sample size target, we go to the market and try to get the numbers by sex. That's how we arrive at the second-hand clothes dealers. I hope that clarifies your concern regarding how we arrive at the numbers. It was based on the mapping exercise done in 2017. We will update it from what we have on the ground.
Anna, would you want to shed more light on the clothing, the second-hand clothing, or maybe in the Nafi? Would you like to shed more light?
The initial question. Can you tell me what the question was?
The question is about how were you able to arrive at the 4 MSMEs, that is the poultry, the fisheries, the horticulture, and the second-hand clothing. but particularly the second-hand clothing. How do you arrive to determine that as part of the 4?
Basically, we looked at those sectors that were not included in the assessment done by the UNDP. So we sat down and then thought that, okay, these were sectors that they were in the informal sector, and then would really be we think would be really impacted by COVID, and they were in the vulnerable sectors. So we selected second-hand clothing, fisheries, horticulture, and then poultry. That's how we came about it. A number of the other sectors were already part of the impact assessment done by the UNDP.
I'd like to add something to that.
Okay, come in, Denasi.
Okay, thank you, Faba. In addition to what Anna has just indicated, we were mindful of the fact that the focus was to be on micro and small enterprises, and the fact that we were also taking into consideration those that harbored mostly women and the youth. So with that in mind, as well as the fact that there were other areas that were taken care of from other studies previously done, we had a list of different subsectors. And as we were concentrating on the areas we wanted, that's how we came about with this. On second-hand clothing in particular, you will see that in the past few years, there's been a serious proliferation of second-hand dealers across the main markets in the Greater Banjul area. And it's because it's seen as an easy area to go into, perhaps to earn daily earnings, to take care of immediate expenses. So because of the high proliferation that we see on used clothing, that's why we also thought it would be helpful to go into the sector to see what is going on in there. So these were some of the reasons why we took up these areas. Thanks.
Thank you very much for the explanation. I would have argued in the same way regarding the clothing, because at the time I was not part of the department. But nonetheless, it is suffice to bring this argument to say why the rationale for the report. Now, those who have asked these questions, are you satisfied with the explanation before we move on?
It's quite.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Yes. Well, I don't know. I still want to follow up on my question. I know most of those in the SMEs are women, but we would have loved to see what proportion of women were also interviewed, if you like, featured, and the impact. I still maintain that it's necessary, because when Suso spoke, he said, yes, if there's need. So I was waiting to hear from those that had given the assignment to say whether that was necessary or not. But I haven't heard Anna, Nonde Nafi, talk about that. But I think there's a need to really, sometimes you subsume things and you expect that it will come out. But definitely, things like gender, for example, what proportion of the women were affected in this, especially in an era where we're trying to bring up the participation of women in trade. I think it's important that these details come out and are not assumed as part of a group, of any given group. That was all I had to say. I just wanted to make sure that whatever we do, especially moving forward, we need to bring out this aggregated data clearly. Too often when we look for statistics for women, you don't find them, because we are all subsumed either in one particular group of either all traders or other small and micro sector or other things. But I think it's important at this stage to really bring out women and how all these things are impacting on them in the economy. Thank you.
Thank you, PS. I think it's well noted. And I agree with your point. At least the analysis should go down to see the impact on women. Because if you look at the MSME landscape, you see more of women participating in it than men, if I may be corrected by Gibos. But for the purpose of this report, we would want to see what you are proposing in the report. And besides, the introduction also should take care of the explanation Anna just gave, so that at least the readers from the onset in the introduction, you know that why sector A, B, and C are identified under this study. Mary Tylin, can you take the floor? Yes.
You have well, similar vein as the PDF pointing out that there might be differences in impact between gender. I'd also like to point out there might be differences in impact in rural and urban Gambia, and noting that this sample is from urban Gambia and that the findings might be used to design support and etc. I'm just wondering, what will this be used for? National action to support MSMEs, or how will you take into account that the impact might be different in rural Gambia? Thank you.
Hello, Mr. Suso. Mr. Suso, you got the first point. You got the first reaction. Okay, then farmer reliance. Can you take the floor?
Yeah, good afternoon, participants. Sorry, after looking at the presentation, I have just two comments to make regarding the selection of the women in the GBOS survey report. And looking at the key women sectors that were heavily affected by our experience in reliance, traders that are in the market that normally travel the lockdown, as well as the women that provide the schools. And during the lockdown, we have experienced schools being closed for months. And we have statistics regarding this sector of women. So we just want to inquire from the GBOS in their review process why this set of women were not captured in the data analysis process. Thank you.
Mr. Suso.
Yes, Baba.
Yeah, can you take this last two? Then we can move to the next presentation.
Okay. We answer two questions, huh?
Yeah, answer these two questions, and then you can also admit the previous recommendation.
Okay. What Mrs. Barry said, do the disaggregate by sex. We will do that and we'll put in the numbers at the annex of the report. The rest of that we'll do that. That's 1, 2. Regarding what the other participant raised about the rural-urban differentials, because we were told to do the assessment in the urban areas. As he said, if you want, for example, interventions across the country, because the impact of COVID of those in the urban areas will be completely different from those in the rural areas. The only way out is when funds are available and our assessment will conduct. But currently, the only available information is in the urban areas. That's what we were assigned to do. Thirdly, the issue raised by the about the issue of the schools. We already have a proposal ready, but we could not secure funds. What we targeted was those who sell in the schools, the beggars the griots and the imams. When those measures were taken in place, those who sell in the schools we are affected. The proposal is already ready. We have a concept note. The imams we are affected because mosques we are closed. Most of the imams depends on handouts for assistance. And the beggars we are affected because most mosques we are closed. There was nobody going to the mosques to give them assistance. And the fourth one was the griots, because there was no programs ongoing and they were really affected. So they will give us work on a proposal. We submitted to UNDP, but unfortunately there was no funding. That's why we stopped the activity. But tell that person that we already have a proposal for those target group to be interviewed, like those who sell at the schools, but there was no funding. If they want, we can share the proposal with her, maybe with assistance, we can say we can get funds and conduct the exercise to include those groups. And women are more affected than males when it comes to those selling at the schools. We already have a proposal ready, just waiting for funding. We start the exercise.
Okay, thank you. That is well heard. And Mary, I don't know whether you are okay with the reaction from the consultant, Mr. Sao. Is that okay, so that we can move to the next presentation?
Yeah, it's okay for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, I want to take this opportunity to invite the next speaker, to do her presentation.
Thank you, Father. As a start, I want to apologize because my video, for whatever reason, is not working on the laptop. So while I'm doing this presentation, I will not be seen. If that is of importance to some, I apologize for that. Thank you. Can we move to the next slide, please? Okay, just to give a quick background to explain why we had to do this rapid assessment and this report. I was hired by the UNDESA as a local consultant under the project of the Gambia government and UNDESA. It's a pilot project to enhance national capacities for unleashing full potentials of MSMEs in achieving SDGs in developed countries. But with focus for this particular job of mine anyway, with regards to how to basically get onto the value chains in preparation of the coming Africa Continental Free Trade Area, the agreement that is coming and expected to start in 20th January. So this was basically to work with the MSMEs and the relevant policy officials to prepare MSMEs to make full use of the AFCFTA. But during the execution of the project, we were met with the COVID. In mid-March, 17th March to be specific, the restrictions started in the Gambia. So some of the areas that I had to deal with required face-to-face and traveling within and outside the borders of the Gambia. So with this development, we decided to have a review of the work plan. And during that review, we thought it was quite pertinent to reflect the ongoing realities in the Gambia with respect to the impact that the COVID was having in the Gambia, but with specific focus on the pilot project, since we're dealing with MSMEs, to focus on those MSMEs. Now, after agreeing that it was important to do some sort of study on how COVID is impacting on MSMEs, we also had a look at the fact that the tourism sector seems to have a lot of attention in comparison to the other operators or subsectors because of the contribution that they have to GDP. So we also looked at the fact that there are a lot of micro and small enterprises that are informal. So even in as much as government wants to help, because of their invisible nature, because they're not registered in any form, it's difficult to basically capture them and make sure that they're taken into consideration. So with this in mind, we had a quick run through with a focus on micro and small enterprises that are informal in the Greater Banjul area, taking note of the fact that there were funding considerations and the fact that we wanted our findings to be relevant, so it was time-bound. So we decided on a rapid assessment, and after doing the run-through with the Ministry of Trade on focus with micro, small, thinking of youth and the women, we came to the petty traders in fisheries, poultry as well, and horticulture. And like I said earlier, because of the sudden proliferation of the used clothing, selling of used clothing across these main areas in the Greater Banjul area, we thought it would be helpful to find out what's going on in that subsector as well. So we decided to take these 4 subsectors that are informal within the micro and small, and that's how we came about it. And the objectives being to basically be able to capture these micro and small enterprises to help government when giving available or planning to give support, to know that this group is available and perhaps we can find out what their needs are. The second one was to also facilitate the inclusion of their concerns that are probably peculiar to just these subsectors, depending on the findings. So it was based on this premise that we decided to do the rapid assessment with these subsectors that I just mentioned. Next slide, please. So just to give a brief of why, because to explain that the UNDESA's focus on the MSMEs, in the case of the Gambia, it is highly important, not just because of the 20% contribution to GDP, but because in the urban area, they constitute 63% of the urban labor force. So this is a major labor force point that is helping the Gambia government with regards to keeping people engaged towards making a living. So with this said, just to help more with the importance of MSMEs, especially micro and small enterprises, the study that Jibos alluded to, the MSME mapping study of 2018, indicated that the total number of micro, small, and medium enterprises is over 100,000 in the Gambia, of which 98% are sole proprietors. Sole proprietors being a single owner, which would basically fall under micro enterprises according to the categorization of MSMEs in the Gambia. So again, we see that then over 98% of these operators are micro enterprises, which shows the magnitude of informal operators in the Gambia. The mapping study further showed that 77% of this group of micro operators are unregistered, as I just said, and that the group consists of 43% female. So we see that more often than not, it is the females that are engaged within this subsector. So again, going on to the next paragraph, we see that the micro enterprises are quite important, and we see that the females constitute the most of this subsector. Just to basically give some answers to my former boss, Nafibari. So the fact that we continue to live under this COVID impact, and we're not sure how long it's going to last, because in the case of the Gambia, as of 5th November, we currently have 38 active cases and 121 deaths. These are the registrations that we have. So we will have to continue to maintain some level of measures to mitigate the spread of the virus. So even though it's been a bit more lax than what it was in the first few months, beginning in March of 2020, we all have to understand that there will continue to be some levels of restrictions, which will continue to impact on the global and the national business activities in the country. Next slide. So this is basically just to show we were unable to have data on the used clothing, but the remaining other 3 subsectors, this is just to show you how erratic these business activities are in the Gambia. So this is over a course of 20 years. I'm not looking at the actual contribution, but I just wanted to show the trend of the fluctuations of these subsectors, just to show their vulnerability in comparison to maybe more formalized and structured business operators. Next slide. So we come to the rapid assessment proper that was conducted by the GBOS. And as I said earlier, because it is time-bound to maintain some level of relevance, it was conducted over a short period of time, I believe within this November of 2020. And the fact that we had to condense the subsectors to 4, as well as the funding constraints, of course. So the respondents were all within the Greater Banjul area, specifically the city of Banjul, Kanifing Municipality, and the town of Birkama. All 500 targeted interviewees were responded to the questionnaires. And just to indicate that GBOS estimates that over 50% of the country's population as being resident in these 3 localities, which reinforces the focus we decided was of importance on these 3 areas with regards to the economic activities that go on in Kanifing, Birkama, and Banjul. Just additional data being that there are estimated over 33,000 business activities in Birkama, and Kanifing coming second at 29,000, and this is nationwide. Birkama comes first, followed by Kanifing. So GBOS did do a disaggregation of the male to female operators in the various subsectors that were supplied to them. And as you can see from the table, females are more engaged in the horticulture and petty trading in fisheries, whilst the males are more into second-hand clothing and poultry farming. So from the look of the tables, I feel that it shows that, sorry, just a second. It shows there's a level of this, sorry, just a second, I messed up my hand notes. Sorry about that. Okay, so we see that within these informal subsectors that are largely invisible and so oversighted in considerations at various levels for support, there are still disparities within these groupings on gender lines. As I said earlier, because you see more female representation on the horticulture and fish sellers, while males are more represented in second-hand clothing and poultry. And from what we see, it might be because the females, due to reinforced social or cultural norms where females' primary roles are that of a caretaker, being daughter, wife, and mother, this restricts their movement, and so being more, giving more priority to the household than work. They are also restricted with regards to access to information, and which could also impact on their confidence to even reach out for what is available with regards to being more involved in the poultry or used clothing. From my opinion, doing this analysis from the data. And while second-hand clothing and poultry requires more business activity where these goods are imported, because for the second-hand clothing, it's a finished good, but it's usually imported from Europe or elsewhere, and will involve dealing with transporters, the Gambia Port Authority, which would deal with paperwork as well and the like. While with poultry farming also, they import the day chicks from Senegal, which might require some traveling to Senegal sometimes, or at least dealing with middlemen and again dealing with the paperwork, which I feel that some of these women might find cumbersome. And this is reinforced by the fact that we see that GBOS indicated most of these respondents were actually not educated in the conventional sense. So in my opinion, I feel these are some of the limitations that the women were facing, which is why they would restrict themselves to dealing more in horticultural activities and fish selling, where apart from not needing to register, the requirements to basically make a living is not as cumbersome as these other two, where you can basically receive your cash and go take hold of the immediate household expenses at home. Next slide, please. So in this slide, you see the estimated average weekly income of the 4 subsectors before the onset of the pandemic, which brought about the different levels of disruptions in their respective supply chains. So taking a look at the horticultural farmers who registered the least earnings pre-COVID, they're making around 2,000 Gambian dollars per week, which is equivalent to about $41 US. And although used clothing and fish traders are not faring much better, because if you look at it, they're also around $3,500, you see that the poultry farmers are indicating a weekly average income of $18,000. This is almost $400 US per week, which is quite high income when thinking about Gambian living standards, especially when you consider that as informal businesses, they're not paying any taxes. So definitely, poultry is doing quite well based on the numbers that were shared. While you can see from those other three that what they're making is basically just enough to make a living hand to mouth, as they would say. So from this pre-COVID scenario, the poultry farmers' earning capacity enables them to basically also bank, because they're making more than enough based on the cost of living in the Gambia. So even though they're at risk of losing their businesses and source of livelihood, they would definitely have a better coping capability than the operators engaged in the other three economic activities. So you will see from the table below that shows the distribution of the level of businesses since the onset of the COVID. This was already alluded to by GBOS, but you can see that the second-hand clothing registered the most loss, because obviously second-hand clothing would be seen as a non-essential business, and this would have been impacted by the restrictions on shipping of these goods. So they would definitely bear the brunt of this. Whilst poultry as well, that showed over almost 90% as well, because like I earlier indicated, their inputs are coming from Senegal, being it the day chick as well as the chicken feed. So the restrictions, even though poultry is an essential item since it's food, but getting these inputs from Senegal with all these restrictions would cause a lot of disruptions to their supply chain. So they have also shown this massive reduction in that end. For horticulture and fish, I believe that the closure of the tourism for this season highly impacted on their huge losses, because more often than not, they're supplying the hotels, the restaurants, and the bars. So seeing the restaurants, the bars as non-essential without looking at the bigger picture, you're basically impacting on their suppliers for the vegetables and the fish, etc., etc. So you can see that the impact was high on all of them, be it essential or non-essential, food or non-food, because of the interconnectivity of how business works at the moment. So I feel that horticulture and poultry indicated a little bit of increment, because regardless of the closure of these businesses, people still have to eat. So the restricted market hours enable them to make some level of sales, which is why you see an increment of 1.4 for horticulture and 1.6 for poultry. Next slide, please. So just a little discussion here regarding the fact that there was discussion that whilst there was disruption and to the earnings of the people in the Gambia, Gambia is one of the highest recipients of remittances. So there was discussion on the fact that remittances have actually increased, and this would basically offset the losses that they were facing. But I think even though the Gambia is the second highest recipient of remittances according to the World Bank, these remittances, even before pre-COVID, were basically for consumption. They weren't coming in for investment where you can make savings to grow and expand and the like. They were coming in solely for consumption. So it wouldn't make that much of a difference if they continue to come in. And there's the belief as well that remittances actually registered an increment because the informal ways that remittances were being sent in were also disrupted because of the restrictions on the movement of persons. So because we don't have people going and coming from Europe as regularly to bring in the raw cash without using the banking system, the diasporans were forced to use the banking system, but not necessarily that the amounts of monies that were being transmitted have actually increased. So this is an argument that's also being discussed, which we need to take note of, because we shouldn't basically think that remittances are covering the losses and the serving as an alternative source of income for these respective individuals. So moving on to the table below, you see that GBOS also discussed what mitigation strategies these people, these operators are taking on their own. So as would be expected, if you look at the second column, get paid employment, those numbers would definitely be low because businesses everywhere have been impacted across subsectors. So because your business is impacted, it doesn't mean that there's an opening somewhere else for you to go and get engaged in. Poultry farmers were the only ones that registered a significant getting employment, and we're at 9.1%, which is still quite low if you really think about it. They're also the ones that indicated 37.7% in doing other businesses. But where I want to focus on, because that's where you see high numbers, is basically where you see the second to last column, where you see them doing nothing, right? Because in those in that column, you see over 20% in almost all of them that they're doing nothing. Because like I said, as explained from the second column of getting paid employment, there's really no other employment to take because most businesses have been closed down. So you're basically left with very little options to to cover your expenses. So I thought that was a very interesting data to look at. While support from family and friends, which GBOS also agrees on, is what they're getting mostly from remittances, which I indicated wouldn't make that much of a difference because they were probably already getting these remittances before as to be immediately consumed. So the fact that they weren't able to get employment and doing nothing is something to really look at, because it leaves people disillusioned, especially when we're talking about the youth who were trying to engage to stay in country. Next slide, please. So with this said, I think it's important to show that government has been making efforts since they put in these restrictions on businesses. So some of those that have been compiled from a study I had a look at from the UNDP shows that there was targeted support in the form of direct cash transfers of $70 to informal MSEs. But looking further into detail of this support, you will see that these were received by operators identified within the tourism industry. And these recipients also were registered with the Gambia Tourism Board. So this was a very limited group that was receiving this support. There's also the Gambia Revenue Authority that extended extensions on filing of tax returns. But again, this would only benefit the formalized businesses, and we're talking about the informal businesses who are not registered. So this wouldn't make any difference to them. There's also the distribution of basic foodstuff, namely rice, sugar, cooking oil, and cash equivalent of about $8. And while this was supposed to be across country, anecdotal evidence has shown that it did not reach all, and some that did receive the food items have indicated that all 3 items were not received by them. There were some families who indicated that they were given 1 or 2 of the items, while there were some households that indicated that there would be different families living within one compound, and they were expected to share this group of food items that were given out, which would not make that much of a difference, because if you're talking about 2 to 5 different households within a compound, it would be difficult to share this one set of rice, oil, and sugar. There's also the United Nations Children Fund of the UNICEF and the Quick NAFA of the National Nutrition Agency that also made cash payments to women and households. But these were for residents outside of the Greater Banjul area. So the people we're doing this study on did not qualify. And there was also a joint press release by the Trade and Justice Ministry on 23rd March, where the President made a declaration to maintain prices at an open market as at the 18th of March. And they also prohibited the hoarding and or exportation of these basic commodities. And to date, there hasn't been really that much of inflation in basic foodstuff. So these are some of the support that the Gambia government gave, but as the explanations I gave below, they haven't been as impactful when we're talking about the micro and small enterprises of these subsectors that we focused on. Next slide. So some of the recommended interventions, as I said, the distribution of the foodstuff is quite important, and as Jibos has indicated from the interviews, most of them have said that it's been very helpful. But the fact that it was not done in a manner that touched on everyone has made it impossible for all to get access to this assistance, with the poultry indicating that they didn't get anything. So I think the distribution method needs to be looked at again to make sure that maybe not some are not getting more than they should, and also to ensure that all those in need, the vulnerable groups, as much as possible, because they fall under the micro and small, especially horticulture and petty selling, the fisheries. These are they make up a group of the most vulnerable in this regard. So they should, as best as possible, be reached by these assistances being given out by Gambia government and partners, both donors and private members in the Gambia. Stimulus packages for grants, I think, would be the most helpful, really, when it comes to these micro and enterprises. And they can be basically given to these people through either in person, which has already been done in some cases, or through via mobile money. which is now being used and has been seen to be very impactful. So these would be the immediate interventions that I believe Gambia government can look into. So they're already doing it, but to make it more targeted and comprehensive, even though we're all aware of the funding issues that Gambia government is also dealing with, since they had to move most of the funds available to dealing with the health issues. So in transition, I think some of the macroeconomic policies could be the lowering of interest rates to encourage access to finance, as well as subsidies on rent payments, because most of these people in the Greater Banjul area would be paying rent. So perhaps that would also be helpful if they look into what subsidies can be put on rent payments. This group would also be dealing mostly with microfinance rather than the conventional banks. Maybe microfinance institutions can look into waiving interest on loans, even though we see that most of these respondents have indicated that horticulture and fish, that they don't have accounts, and those that do have accounts have indicated that they're not taking loans. But this would also be because of the high interest rates that are keeping them away from taking loans. So maybe if loans could be reduced, that would make a difference. But for microfinance institutions, what I'm thinking of is waiving the interest rates and postponing loan repayment and the financing facility. Next slide. So for the proposed policy prescriptions, I think to capture these informal businesses, Gambia government has already been taking some measures in this regard, because the single window business registration has been ongoing for a number of years now. But what I'm saying is this initiative to further promote and facilitate the formalization of MSMEs towards having them more visible and included in decision-making platforms, it should be expanded rather than, because this has been discussed about decentralizing the single window business registration, but I'm not sure how far it has gone. But I also believe that where the municipalities are aware of the concentration of these informal operators, they can basically be met where they are to have them come on board and to make it clear to them that it will not be for tax purposes. The single-digit interest rate on loans that I discussed, maybe it would be difficult to have it across the board. But if we basically have a criteria where they qualify as micro or small enterprises, this would help a lot in getting more people access to loans, as well as the ability to grow and diversify whatever businesses they're engaged in. You'll see that in each of these proposals, I have the institutions that I feel would be helpful in making this happen. So there's also been discussion of establishing an MSME fund for a number of years now, and this would definitely make a big difference in mitigating the challenges of access to finance. So I think the Ministry of Trade should really push with regards to basically getting this up and running, especially for the micro and small enterprises to begin to be less scared of loans or assistance in monetary terms. I think that the MPRETEC model that was introduced with assistance from the UNDP was very helpful. And I think it would be very important to extend the outreach of this business development services to the micro and small enterprises, so that they would also have some level of training and understanding with regards to keeping business, especially when we're talking about the women in the horticulture and the fish selling, to know that some portions of their earnings, it would be important to have some savings from that. I think increasingly there's discussion of digital digitalization on e-commerce and e-payment to serve as an option, since we've seen the disruption that dealing in hard cash has been, especially in the case of the Gambia. So lessons learned from the COVID exposures in business. I think a very basic model can be considered for e-commerce and e-payments, because right now we see especially youth businesses engaged in this digitization. But if we want to cover all, I think it's important to roll out some level of more comprehensive exposure and training to be really, really simplified, of course, because we have to take note of the literacy levels. But we need to start at some level on this digitalization. And lastly, the focus of this project anyway was the AFCFTA. So I think we can, especially on this MPRETEC model, to assist the micro and small enterprises with regards to getting this BDS training to help them in preparing themselves to engage, to make use of the AFCFTA. So government can also leverage on available AFCFTA technical and financial support, either both locally and at the regional level, perhaps with ECOWAS and the AU and donors as well, to engage micro and small enterprises for potential growth and or diversification along the AFCFTA value chains. And this is what I had based on the data I received from GBOS. Thank you.
Okay, that's a good presentation by the local consultant. I think it was quite informative, particularly the last part of it where you have the proposed policy prescriptions. Now, without wasting much time, I just want to let the floor open to those who have questions to ask regarding the presentation. If there are no questions, then we have the discussion Q&A as reflected on the screen. There are some questions that were asked in advance, so probably we could feature them on the screen so that the two presenters could look at what is related to their presentation, and also the international consultant as well, so that at least we could provide answers to those questions. So if you have... yes. Hello.
Hello, Fava. It's Babukar.
Babukar, yes.
GTC.
Yeah, Babukar Sise, yes.
Yes. How are you?
Good.
Let me join everybody to thank GBOS for the work well done, and my sister for the wonderful presentation.
Okay.
At least I was looking at their sample size, which is 500 about 115,000 MSME, which is a good sample size. The only thing is, just as they highlighted, as among their shortfall, part of the shortfall was it is not nationwide, or I think that has been alluded to by almost the previous speakers. To my sister Ndenafi, I've heard you talking about the MSME fund, which needs to be pushed by the Ministry of Trade, which is multi. My question is, how do you marry this MSME fund with the Women Enterprise Fund? And as part of the policy prescription, how do we leverage on this Women Enterprise Fund, given that I think good number of the MSMEs are women, to support this sector? Thank you.
Yes, do you want to make a statement?
Sure, I can respond to that immediately. If I'm
Yeah, sure.
I believe that since they would all be funds that are being managed by the Gambia government and funds that are received based on the request of the Gambia government, it would be prudent that the Ministry of Trade as well as the Ministry of Women's Affairs work together to make sure that requests being received will not be duplication. So they would probably have a criteria where they would request whether you have already received funding from this other fund, how much it was, what is it for, etc., etc. But at some level, the Ministry of Women's Affairs and Ministry of Trade, if these funds are activated, will need to be working together to make sure that they don't duplicate or duplicate their efforts. Because some women might be under the MSME and qualify, while others might not be under MSMEs. There might be some women businesses that are larger and would not benefit from the MSME fund, but might benefit under the women enterprise fund. So it just depends. Thanks.
Thank you, Nenafi, for that reaction. If I may throw little light on the two funds. So what we intend to do as a government is to have these two funds established. Then they will operate under a roof. That's the intention. As the name implies, Women Enterprise Fund, it will support more to women. That is the focus. But the other one will be a general one. But when we receive requests, then if it is a woman, then we just advise you to go to the Women Enterprise. So that's how we intend to do. This is to make sure that at least we have enough funding for the MSMEs, irrespective of the sectors. So that's the framework for the implementation of the two funds. Thank you. I hope that satisfies your question, Babukar.
Yeah. I think that is okay. And then I think has a put on to marry to see how best we can manage to avoid duplications.
Yeah. So I want if you can show the questions that were submitted by participants, so at least we can go through those questions.
Baba?
Yes, okay.
Yeah.
Baba, hello?
Yes.
I don't know how to put my hand on, but I have
Okay.
So I just wanted to thank Nenafi of John. When she was the last, I think was the last or second to last slide, when she was talking about the policy measures that should be taking place, I understand she spoke about that being on the screen. Unfortunately, maybe I was not able to see that, but I would want if she could come back to ways and means of getting these policy reforms done and the collaboration that is needed really for the SMEs to be formalized. Because when she talked about having the SMEs visible among other things, and this is precisely some of the things that some of the private sector organizations, I can name like the organization that I belong to, the Gambia Women's Chamber, is trying to do. They're trying to formalize. Actually, most of the women that we have had on board have never been through formalization. They were already, they had never registered. And we're trying to make them use the single window business registration, among others, and other things. And through that, I think they're formalized, they're captured in the system. They will be paying taxes, however small, etc., etc. So I would just want her to probably elaborate more on the recommendations that they have given in terms of helping some of these MSMEs formalize. And I think probably I have not seen that it's there, but I think there's need for more collaboration with these organizations that I have named to make sure that government achieves that. Thank you.
Okay, let me just a quick response to Nafibari's issue. I know this is a forum where we have shared information and then presentations have been done and people have shared their input. And then I think there should be a next level. Then the policy prescription that the NAFI have highlighted here, of course, they will be noted by the ministry so that we see what we could do to at least provide answers to those policy prescriptions. But nonetheless, I know GRA at some point did a survey to look at how to formalize the informal sector, because it has come many times in their meeting agenda in terms of revenue collection. Sometimes we have missed out a chunk of the economic operators who are not paying tax, like the small businesses. But now I think there is an intention to look at how do we formalize these MSMEs, just so we have a formal sector. So nonetheless, I would believe that the ministry can work with GRA in this formalization of MSMEs, at least to have a wide basket where the revenue collection will be wide enough and to reduce burden on those few industries that are paying taxes. So I would ask Lenafi if you have anything to add on to this. If you have anything, please comment.
I was just going to agree with PS Nafi Bari that yes, I did mention the single window business registration, but I also mentioned the use of the KMC as well, because in as much as we said that they're informal businesses and they're not paying any taxes, we do know that a KMC collects, gives them tickets for a fee on a daily basis. Even the small vegetable sellers in the KMC markets, and I would assume that would be the same for Birkama and Banjul, they pay daily tickets to these municipalities. So I think if the ministry or GAIPA could basically collaborate with these ticket holders at the KMC level, they could basically expand those tickets to capture some additional data from these, especially these micro businesses. So single window, definitely yes, but with these ticket holders, so that they know that anyway, they're paying this ticket anyway, that which is a tax, really, in my opinion. They're paying tax on a daily basis. So it wouldn't hurt during those collections to take some details from them, which they can share with the Gambia Women Chamber of Commerce, the GAIPA, and the Ministry of Trade, just to have a database of everyone that is basically engaged in some level of business activity. I hope that answers your question, Pierre.
Father, may I just add?
Thank you, Lena.
Somebody wants the floor?
Father, may I just add that we're also working with DESA on formal guidelines towards formalization. So the draft was already prepared by the Isatunjai, and then PS Barry, most likely you will, I'm sure you will be invited to the validation of that report, of that document. Sorry. Yeah.
This is Isatunjai. Hello. Hello?
I'm hearing you. I don't know whether Faba is hearing you.
I was not hearing. I lost it. Yes, Anna, can you come back again? I didn't get you.
No, I think it's in the high set of Faba.
You would like the floor.
Yes, I just wanted to come in very quickly. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. I just wanted to... Hello?
Yes, come in. We can hear you.
I wanted to confirm what Anna said, and that we have been working together on all of this. And basically, it should lead to a meeting in the second week of December to look at the recommendations on how to pursue the formalization agenda. And, there are quite a few provisions in existing policies and regulations that basically cover a number of issues that have been discussed today. And I think it's really important to look at what is happening, why there is no implementation, and how can we make sure that these policies, the provisions that are stipulated in these policies and regulations are implemented. This has to deal with oversight bodies. It has to deal with, like the single window registration. It also has to deal with gender-related issues, which NAFI has been raising. So I think that, in the next 3 weeks or so, we should be getting together at a policy level to make decisions on how to move this formalization agenda forward. And it is all in the same UN-DESA support package. I just wanted to highlight that.
Okay, that's quite interesting to know. And then we hope we could make a team to do that agenda. Can I call Usman Sanyang? The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Father, for giving me the floor. I would like to thank all the participants, all the presenters, for making such a wonderful presentation. I just want to ask a question based on the horticulture sector that were captured in the assessment. The horticulture farmer might not necessarily be a trader, because some would only produce, and they might not necessarily be the very people who will be selling out the produce. So according to the horticulture value chain, you have the vegetable input dealers, vegetable producers, and vegetable traders. Which of the above three were actually captured in the assessment? Because if you talk about the MSMEs, good number of the vegetable, the input dealers as well as the traders could fall in, or were they actually randomly selected? I want to know, please. And what impact have that actually, or what made you actually select the specific value chains component that have just been mentioned?
Lenavi? The floor is yours.
Yeah. To be quite frank, we did not indicate such detail when we asked GBOS to conduct this interview. But from GBOS's response, they conducted the women in the gardens. So unless I'm wrong, Ali can basically indicate, but it would be the gardens, women operating in the gardens as producers.
Just to clarify, we went to the department. That was where we got the list of the horticulture gardens that are within the Greater Bantu area. So as Neri already mentioned, we went to the horticultural gardens.
So only the producers were captured?
Yes. They are producers, but they also sell.
Good. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, Babukar MCC. If you can drop your hand down.
Yes, Father.
Yeah.
This one, I'm the one missing it. When the Nafi was presenting, I heard her saying, I saw something like, of the unregistered businesses, we have 43 female and 36 male. 43% are female and 36% are male. I don't know whether I'm the one missing the data, and if you add that, it will give us 79% there.
That is correct. That's from the data I collected from the rapid assessment.
Yeah, if that could be added, because I don't know whether we have another one different from male and female.
We'll look into it. Thank you for that.
Yes. Okay.
Babukar, if I may come in, the other disaggregate will be most likely the youth, because today we also have had similar encounter with UNDP. I think most of these UN agencies now, they disaggregate their data, men, women, and youth. And they will argue that the youth also may also fall in those categories. I'm sure the disaggregate may be the youth. So there's no other gender other than men and women, but I'm sure they also use the youth as a disaggregate now.
Okay, I think then if that's the case, that should be clearly captured so that at least it can clear the doubt.
Any hand up? I've not seen any hand. Clerk? Yes, can we go to the questions?
Yeah, in the screen, you can see some questions we collected from registered participants. And these questions are for both speakers, and also certainly if participants, colleagues are interested to further discuss on these questions, they'll be more than welcome. So you can see the questions on the screen now.
So, Lenafi and Mr. Sao, please go through and see what relates to you that you can provide answers to.
Yes, thank you, Father. I think point one has been answered when we talked about the MSME fund and the Women Enterprise Fund as resources that are going to be made readily available. Even though I'm not sure if that would cover the immediate term. But in the immediate term, we discussed the continuation of the provision of the foodstuff and cash. So these resources that we're hoping government will consider in the immediate to short term with regards to assisting these MSMEs. On the second question, how can government institutions help the private sector reduce the impact of COVID-19? Again, this goes back, unless someone can give additional recommendation, this goes back to the immediate responses being the foodstuff and the cash, obviously based on availability. But these are areas that the government can look into while we also talk about the BDS through the MPRITEC on scaling it out to touch these micro enterprises, because this will help strengthen their business acumen to help them become resilient in the future. What can the government do to support the recovery of MSMEs in the following? In the recovery of MSMEs following the COVID-19 pandemic and its adverse effects on the economy. I think these are quite repetitive to points 1 and 2. Point 4, what kind of support, both in the short and long term, can be handed to small tourism enterprises? We're not dealing with this tourism sector in this actual rapid assessment, so that wasn't looked into. And point 5, is there any plan to provide COVID-19 recovery plan for business support organizations and MSMEs after this session? I honestly have no idea. That's something that the Ministry of Trade can consider, especially based on the recommendations that have been given by my report. Point 6, how effective will policy interventions to the 4 MSME categories have on the country's performance in regional and global value chains, in contrast to the possible prolonged negative shocks of COVID-19 in the country and the emerging second wave of the pandemic globally. Anna might want to correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think we're talking about immediate redress for these MSMEs in country. And we're not talking about global value chains in this particular activity. The effectiveness of the policy interventions will depend on the commitment that government and other stakeholders, i.e. the business operators, take their recommendations of. That is how, during implementation, and that we can measure the effectiveness of the policy interventions. And that's basically based on which one of them the government will actually take up. And the next one is how does losses of both current and future FDI to the Gambia impact MSMEs in the 4 categories? These are my small enterprises. So FDI doesn't come into play in my opinion. I stand to be corrected. Point 7 is what are COMESA country strategies and policies to improve laws or business environment for MSMEs, competitiveness and regional integration in the context of post-COVID-19. I'm assuming the person that asked the question means ECOWAS, since Gambia is ECOWAS, COMESA is on the other part. The strategies and policies, basically the work I was focusing on was Gambia government. I wasn't thinking at the regional or continental level. So maybe that's something that we can also look into. But we would need to know what available support ECOWAS has and what available support African Union has, both technical and financial, where we can find out in which areas the Gambia needs assistance in. But that is not something that was taken into consideration for this report. We were just focusing on Gambia government and what they can do for the micro and small enterprises in the Gambia. Question 8, how we can address and assess COVID-19 impact in rural areas. I believe GBOS is very ready and willing to do this study as long as they are funded to do so that we can also find out what's going on in that part, especially in consideration of the fact that the highest levels of poverty is actually in the rural areas. Point 9, how can MSMEs overcome post-COVID-19 challenges? Well, with the different areas that we talked about, the MPRETEC for BDS, we also talked about getting them on board at a basic level of digitalization, and maybe some other areas, recommendations that I can collect from here. That would be a start to helping MSMEs build some level of resilience, I believe. And point 10, how long will economic recovery take? I don't think anybody knows right now, since the pandemic is ongoing. Yeah, thanks.
Very much. Yes?
If you are done, can I say just, I have a comment on what Nati has just said.
Okay, quickly.
Quickly, yes. I don't know what the specific question for Sally was, but the answer she gave, talking about that the report was just meant for Gambia. I was thinking if it's an impact assessment, it could be used. I mean, we belong to ECOWAS. Unfortunately, the Minister of Trade is the local office for ECOWAS. I think, I don't know, depending on what the ministry thinks, I think we can also use documentation to seek for funding from ECOWAS. I know the whole of the region is affected, but there is nothing wrong in Gambia starting, but this is an assessment. Yes, it it is a rapid assessment. It does not cover everything, but I think it can be a tool that we can use, or we can use this as a starting point to seek for, yes, government intervention, but also regional assistance or any other possible area of intervention. I just thought I should bring that out, but we should not only, it was meant for a purpose, yes, for Gambia government intervention, but I think it would not be wrong also to be used as probably a pilot, something to look at where we are and the areas that we need urgent intervention in terms of using it as a document that we can leverage on any possible funding. Thank you.
Thank you, P.S. Barry. I concur with you 100%, but I'm happy that the Honorable Minister is part of this and the Permanent Secretary is also part of this. Like I initially mentioned, this is an opportunity for us to look at what has been done. And I'm happy we are getting to the end and issues have been raised, like the one that you just raised. We will look at this document at the ministry's level and then we can use it to at least attract funding, because the COVID is not going to be difficult to explain because it is a menace that has challenged the globe, and then more so the MSME. So I believe after all of this, we will not lose sight of those who are supporting right now, and then we will not also feel shy to extend our hands to people that can also share their resources to ensure that we are able to address the issues that are raised here. So we will take it up as a ministry and then see wherever we could get funding. But UNDESA, they have started this process, and then I hope we will be able to walk through to the end of the entire program. So that is something that we are also thinking of. So Nenafi, I don't know whether you have anything to say.
Faba?
Yes, yes.
If I may comment, if you could recall, during this presentation, she also made mention of other studies, like Gibos also made mention of other studies with regard to COVID. So this, I think what P.S. Barry was saying make a very good sense. But then us as a country or as a ministry, what we can also do, we can also collapse all those studies together and stratify them. Probably work with GBOS and look at the sectors that are much affected from those 4 studies, or which one is more detailed. Then we do a comprehensive report, collapsing all those studies together. Then we seek for funding, then just picking one out of the 4. I think it will be prudent for us to collapse all the studies together. If that is possible, then we look for a possible way to have a comprehensive report from those 4 studies. And then we use that as our tool to look for further collaborations than only picking this one.
And that is great. That is great. We will do so. That is great. Yeah.
I endorse what Omar said. Actually, that's what I was referring to. We were here to listen to the various reports. I'm talking about all the reports that we have that we can use as the document. We should coordinate those recommendations and the findings to make it a document that we can use. Precisely what he said is what I meant. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Nafibari. So I think we are getting closer to 4:30. And without, okay, that is a hand. Then if you want to say something? Nenafi? Okay. Without a hand raised, we have to bring this webinar to a close. I'm happy that we started well and then we ended well. I'm also happy that we have...
Omar Badi was saying. Can you hear me, Faber?
Yeah, I can hear you.
No, go ahead. Sorry, that came. It's a delayed response.
Hello.
Go ahead.
Baba, you're on mute.
I'm sorry for that. I said I'm happy that we have a great interaction on this webinar, but I would want to ask whether PS would have to say anything before we do a closing remark, or even the Honorable Minister. Okay, I will assume maybe they might have left. So I want, on behalf of the Honorable Minister and the Permanent Secretary, to at least register our sincere regard and appreciation for the support that has been extended by UNDESA in collaboration with UN system, other UN system in the Gambia here. We also want to use this opportunity to thank the international consultant and the local consultant and GBOS for providing this detailed and informative work to this webinar. And then I also want to thank everybody who has participated by the invitation of this ministry to this process. And then we want to assure you that, yes, it will not gather dust. Like I mentioned, we will take this, escalate it further. And then the happiest thing is the minister is involved, the PS is involved. So that has put a lot of color in this process. And then we hope we as technicians will work together. Like my colleague Umar have said, we will also look at other reports and see how we could do a better coordination, or we try to put things that we can use to attract the attention of donor partners or institutions that can provide initial support. So I want to take this opportunity to also to thank the technical backup, Mr. Clark and Annie, for providing us less IT issues. So all the same, I want to congratulate everybody for taking part. I don't want to take much of the time because it's almost 4:30. So I wish to declare the session closed so that at least you can create a new opening thereafter. I thank you all for your understanding and attention. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Sorry, Faba. Thank you. If I may jump in quickly. This is Clark from DESA, and following the message of Faba, I would just like quickly inform colleagues that we will soon share a survey of this webinar.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I mentioned it earlier on that a survey link will be sent to all participants, and then I encourage all of us to look at the survey link and then fill and send back to them so that at least they can use it as an assessment. So that's the end of the program. Thank you so much, Mr. Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Faba.
Thank you, Faba.
Thank you.